Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. We'll call to order the July 1st meeting of the Auburn County Council. We'll begin with a moment of silent meditation or reflection followed by the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to roll call. Councilman Fincham.
Here.
Councilman Braun.
Here.
Councilman Webb.
Here.
Councilwoman DeWitt.
Here.
Councilman Williams.
Here.
Councilman Bundy.
Here.
Councilwoman Prosser.
Here.
Council, in front of you, you have the regular meeting minutes from the June 17th meeting.
Move to approve as presented. Second.
And we have a motion to second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recognition of visitors: Ann Fincham, Andy Barron, Jennifer Sharkey, Troy Ackerman, Jim Catterat, Jen Hathaway, and Tammy Urick. Okay, thank you. Welcome. Move on to communications. This evening we have with us Jennifer Sharkey from Indiana LTAP. She has come to just give us a brief update on new legislation affecting our community crossings mapping grant. So welcome.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Prosser, if I could have your assistance. Thank you very much. So while that gets passed around, again, I'm Jennifer Sharkey. So I actually am your neighbor up north. I live up in Steuben County, but I work for the Indiana Local Technical Assistance Program. We're out of Purdue University, so we assist cities, towns, and counties across the state with primarily transportation-focused resources and needs. But one of the items that we've worked on this year was part of the House Enrolled Act 1461, which is now Public Law 173. So we provided a report to the state legislature of the condition of the local road and bridge network across the state, as well as financial status and needs into the future. So that was one of the activities that we were involved with. But since that passage of the legislation, went through and did a brief summary of some of the different sections there. So you'll see that on your handout. There's about, I believe, 13 different areas of focus. The first few there listed, the public-private partnership, just allows local units to be in public-private partnerships for transportation projects, and outlined a little bit more of those specifics from design through construction as well as right-of-way acquisition. So I think if you're familiar with the LEAP district down south, I think some of this legislation came out of that project that that was a larger one for Clinton County and Boone County in that area and Frankfort. But then you'll see a few other items. The railroad tax credit mostly applies for rail companies. And then the increase of the speed limit there on I-465. So that'll be, I believe, effective today, July 1st. There's also some other pieces of legislation in there about tolling, allowing some tolling options for the state DOT on state highways. So not necessarily directly impacting local units, but certainly could be an impact depending on what facilities may get tolled in the future. The wheel tax and excise surtax, we'll talk about that more on item 11, but there were some provisions there for that passage for local units to be eligible for some new funding opportunities. One thing that the City of Auburn would be interested in is the Motor Vehicle Highway Restricted Fund. So right now, as you get your motor vehicle highway disbursements, 50% can go on unrestricted, 50% to the restricted use. Now there's a provision in here beginning in June of 2026 that if your average Payzer rating of your network was an average of 6 or greater, and you had 15% of your network rated Payzer 1 or 2, 15% or less, then you could be eligible to only have 40% go into the restricted side. So as far as the administrative piece of that on the state agencies, I believe they're still figuring out how they are going to track that and administer it, but that is now available for local units. The other item to be aware of is the PASER program. So LTAP, we are in charge of collecting all the asset management plans from local agencies, and a lot of local agencies use the PASER system, the pavement asset surface evaluation rating system, to evaluate their networks. So part of the legislation was requiring us to certify that program. So we have been doing trainings, workshops in the month of June to get individuals certified as a PASER rater. So whether you do that in-house or if you consult with a consulting firm, just make sure whoever is rating your network with the PASER system is certified come 2026. So it won't be required for this year for the 2025 submittal, but come next year it will be a requirement. And the other piece of that on the LTAP side is that we have some advanced quality assurance protocols that we'll be following to ensure that the data being submitted is accurate, and if there's any deficiencies that we're out there helping to train and rectify those deficiencies. Couple other items, the low water crossings. So this was formally defined now in state statute of what a low water crossing is, as well as being eligible for community crossings matching grant funds. So there's also a provision in there for the state DOT to make information available to local units on what other grant opportunities may be available for those specific crossings. I'm not sure if the city has any of those crossings within your jurisdiction, but just there for your information. Cumulative Bridge Fund. So this goes and defines, one, what that fund can be used for. So that fund is mainly on the county side of things. However, it does define a bridge as greater than 20 feet. So any structures that are 20 feet or less in span length are the responsibility of the municipality. So just be aware of that designation there. And then there's also a provision that if a municipality intends to build a bridge that is greater than 20 feet in span length, that they consult with the county entity, because once that bridge is installed, it would become responsibility of the county unit. So there's some discussion there. The other piece, the annual operations report, just changed the threshold of who's required to submit that, although it used to be population 15,000 and greater, but it has now been reduced to population 5,000 and greater. So I'm not sure, is Auburn around 13,000? 14? So this would be a new reporting requirement for the city. And we'll be providing training for that at the Clerk Treasurer's annual conference here in August, as well as throughout the next year, because that will become due June 1st of 2026 to report on the 2025 fiscal activities of the street department. And feel free to interrupt with any questions as we move through here. The biggest piece that had a lot of discussion and back and forth throughout the session was on community crossings itself. So I broke this up into item 11 as the funding and then item 12 as the actual program. So if you look at item 11, beginning the state fiscal year 2026, which starts today, July 1st of 25 and goes through June 30th of 2026, instead of that pot of money being solely used for the grant program of community crossings, that pot of money now has specific allocations to other activities as prescribed by the legislation. So this year, you can see that chart there of a fiscal analysis that the Legislative Services Group at the State House put together. There will be each year $100 million set aside for the grant program. So now there will only be $100 million available through that mechanism, whereas before it was whatever the balance was of that fund in totality. So $100 million is set aside for that community crossings matching grant piece. There's another distribution for the railroad tax credit. So it could be up to that 14.5 million that would go to the state general fund as a pass through. And then the state highway reconstruction improvement fund of that 20 million. That's actually for the local tracks program. So there are several projects that were underfunded currently in that program. So over the next 5 years, there'll be that 20 million distribution to that program. And then starting in fiscal year 2027, so that would be July 1st of 2026 through June 30th of 2027, there's a new funding opportunity for local units. So if you're eligible to enact a wheel tax and excise surtax, which all 92 counties are eligible, as well as municipalities that are population 5,000 or greater. So those units, if they pass a wheel tax or have a wheel tax excise surtax adopted, then could be eligible for this lane mile direct distribution opportunity. So that means whatever's left over, you can see in fiscal year 2027, legislative services estimated anywhere from 190 million up to 255 million. So those funds would then be directly distributed to the local units that have adopted that wheel tax excise surtax, and it's based on the proportion of lane miles. So whatever the city of Auburn's lane miles are divided by the total number of lane miles of all the eligible units, that would be the portion of funds that would come directly to the city. So it's a little bit convoluted there at times because we don't know exactly how much money would be left over each year. We don't know how many units will start to adopt a wheel tax excise surtax to be eligible for this, to know what each unit's piece of the pie, if you will, would be. So it's a bit up in the air at the moment. Yes.
Jennifer, thank you. This legislation was crazy to follow during session, so I appreciate you kind of simplifying it for us. Well, this was one of the things that I had several questions about, but specifically, if we as the municipality pass the wheel tax, but the county does not, is that reflective on how we score within that lane mile distribution?
No, it's solely based on that eligible unit. So it would, and conversely, I guess if the county passed a wheel tax, that does not make the city eligible.
Correct.
The city would have to pass their own.
Okay.
And they'd be stacked, is my understanding as well.
Correct. At the current time, there was no change to the existing wheel tax excise surtax legislation, so it would be stacked.
And then one thing, I was at a meeting last week talking about the lane mile distribution. My understanding is if you don't pass the wheel tax, whatever your lane mile distribution would have been, your, let's say we're able to apply for 1 million. Whatever that lane distribution is, if we don't pass a wheel tax, if that's deducted from that 1 billion that we can actually, our initial 1 million, whatever that initial allocated amount is.
Right. So same concept, but flipped. So actually, if you get the distribution, so let's say City of Auburn through the lane mile distribution, it was $1 million that came back. And let's say the community crossings matching grant program had a cap of 1.5 million that you could apply for. Since you already got 1 million in that direct distribution, then you could only apply for the difference. So you could only apply for the 500,000.
So it has no effect on the, let's say, original 1 million that we'd be eligible for.
Correct. It does not if you do not pass or do not qualify. If you
They explained it wrong because they used the 1 million number, said if your lane distribution was, let's say,
Okay.
160,000, that you'd only be eligible for 840.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think some of the discussion was the intent, from my understanding of conversations, was that it's community crossings, but either you can get funds through the grant, the traditional grant program, or there's this opportunity for just a direct distribution. But of course, to get that direct distribution, the common phrase we hear is skin in the game from the local unit. So then if we move down to item 12, there were some small changes to the grant program itself. Mostly that there's only 100 million each year. And instead of being on a calendar year that we're used to for the community crossings call for projects, it's now on the state fiscal year. So it's a July through June fiscal year. And there's only 100 million to award through that program. And some of the local matching requirements have shifted a little bit. So if you look at, for a city town population, greater than 10,000 would still be the 50% match. Most of the change, I believe, was in the county population threshold. It raised from 50,000 population up to 55,000. And there is a provision in there that at least 50% of those grant awards must go to counties with less than the 50,000 population, as well as local units. And I apologize, I have a typo there, of municipalities that are located within those counties. So a little change. Most likely there could be just one call for community crossings within that fiscal year. I'm not sure how the state is going to administer it. I believe they're still discussing, but there will be a little bit of change there. And then the last item, which we're still dissecting, but is the Township Roads and Infrastructure Fund. So now townships must adopt a plan on an annual basis for the balance of all their unrestricted funds that exceed their township budget from the previous year. So that means, and they submit it to the Department of Local Government Finance. So the intent is that if there's funds that are unrestricted that aren't used for their annual plans, that must go into a roads and infrastructure fund. So then those dollars would then be utilized for road and infrastructure projects within their township boundary. But to administer that, they must enter into a memorandum of understanding with a city, town, or county unit to oversee, bid out, and conduct those infrastructure projects, as long as the township approves those infrastructure projects. This is new to the townships, new to the local units, cities, towns, and counties. Our recommendation is start to talk with your townships within your jurisdiction and see what they're planning, if they have ideas, and maybe make sure that's reflected in any capital improvement plans from your street department, and have that dialogue early rather than later. That's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of information in that bill. Tried to summarize as efficiently as possible, but you have my card there if you have any follow-up questions. I will say we do have a webinar coming up on Tuesday, July 8th at 7 p.m. And that is to discuss the wheel tax and excise surtax, just to give some information on what it is, how it's used, how it's implemented, and distributed to the different units. So if you're interested, I can send that link for registration to perhaps Becky or Brandy, excuse me, Brandy, and maybe she can get that. Okay, I can send that to Brandy and get that to each of you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to address the council? Come up, just state your name.
Hi there, my name is Jen Hathaway. Thanks everybody for your time. I'm here on behalf of DeKalb County Pride and to share a little bit about our organization and the event we had last week, and to just thank the community and for members of the community that are, some of you are in this room, for your support, and to share a little bit about why DeKalb County Pride is important in this community. So as the VP of DeKalb County Pride, we are a nonprofit organization, federally recognized. There's 4 members of our board, and our goal is to create an inclusive, affirming space here in DeKalb County. We want to thank you for your part in this weekend's event, and kind of share a little bit about what that event looked like. and to tell you a little bit about the why. The day my daughter came out to us, my husband looked at me and said, "We have to move to a bigger city. We can't raise her here." And at that time, she was in middle school, and we were terrible about what the life she would have here in Auburn. What that might hold. Would she be safe? Would she have the same opportunities as her siblings? Would she be treated fairly? We had just built a home in a neighborhood that we loved. Our kids were thriving. Our family and friends were here. I had a career that I loved. My husband is an orthopedic engineer living near the orthopedic capital of the world. Auburn was our home, but we weren't sure if Auburn could be her home. I also thought, what happens if families like us feel like we have to move away? And so I told him, what if we stayed and tried to make the community a little bit safer for her? So we surrounded her with affirming people. We asked questions. We talked to experts. I joined the Pride Board. I joined other groups. We talked to her principal. I talked to her superintendent every year about tolerance and diversity. We made our spaces unapologetically welcoming to everyone. We no longer, when we would hear people make comments that seemed unaffirming, we no longer ignored those. 5 years, 6 years later, she's graduating from high school. She's going into an honors program for special education and elementary education. And she went from a terrified kid that was afraid to be herself around her peers and her teachers to a young woman that is living her authentic self proudly. She excelled in academics and theater and show choir. And she built strong friendships. And she created spaces, her own spaces, where she valued people. And that is what Pride is about. It is about when we give people space to be themselves, to live authentically, they thrive, they lead, and they grow. And so I want to share a little bit about DeKalb Pride. This weekend, we held our first official DeKalb Pride at the James Cultural that's a little personal, Plaza. So we worked with the city to close some streets. We worked with the police to hire a police officer to be there with us that day. We followed typical policies that are required by any local group that wants to have a event downtown. No favors were offered, none were asked. And that matters because if you look at social media, you saw a lot of comments. People were angry. People felt threatened. They asked, why would the city allow this to happen? Well, the city didn't allow it to happen, just like they didn't make any special exceptions. They allowed it to happen just like they would allow any organization that wanted a space there. And for that, we're truly grateful. They treated us with respect, dignity, and professionalism, just like they would offer any other organization. So thank you. The event was absolutely family friendly. So we vetted every vendor that came. We had local businesses, nonprofits, churches, 3 churches, live music. And if you came to our event, you would have seen that it was like any other downtown family friendly event throughout the year. People came to us and said, oh my gosh, we never thought we would see this in town. We felt so safe, so seen, so heard. And that's what it was about. It was about building community for people that sometimes don't ever feel seen or heard in this community. Pride is not about everybody agreeing. It's about making space for everyone and ensuring that no one feels ashamed of who they are. There's sometimes a painful irony for the queer community. They're often accused of feeling like they are pushing an agenda or recruiting. And simply, they're just trying to live their lives. They're our neighbors, our realtors, our nurses, our attorneys, our teachers in town. They're our taxpayers. They're contributing to our community, just everyday people trying to live their lives. And there's a statistic that I bring up often when I speak to educators or in different forums that I do, that if an LGBTQ youth student, young person has one person in their life that is affirming, just one. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be a coach. Their statistical rate of suicide goes down 40%. That's one person. That could be someone in this room. And so that's the work that DeKalb County Pride is doing. We are simply trying to support people that are already here. And so this Starting next week, we are going to start a support group at a local church for families who want to support a loved one. They just might not know how to do it. They might not be there yet. And so those are the types of things that we're doing. We're building relationships, educating, and providing unconditional love. So thank you for listening. Thank you for providing dignity and respect when we came to you and asked to hire a security officer for closing a road. We know that those are all things that you do because the law, the policies are there, but we really did feel appreciated this week. And if you don't understand why DeKalb Pride is needed, I encourage you to go look at those Facebook posts. I think you'll see why. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. As a friend, I want to say I'm just really proud of the work that she's done to make this happen in our community.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Hearing none, we'll move on. Clerk Treasurer?
Good evening. The current vouchers for, excuse me, $2,566,767.42.
Move to approve.
Second. Okay, we have a motion second for the vouchers. Any questions, discussion?
I'll abstain from voucher 95541 in the amount of $39.99 as my place of employment.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
I also have the May bank reconciliation done. It is out on the website for your review. Thank you.
Ordinances and resolutions.
Thank you. Ordinance number 2025-9, an ordinance amending Chapter 94 of the City Code of Auburn ordinances. This ordinance amends and restates Chapter 94 weeds, trees, and shrubbery of the City of Auburn Code of Ordinances. I move that we pass ordinance number 2025-9 on second and final reading.
And we have a motion and a second. Suspend the council meeting. Open up the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak in regards to ordinance 2025-09? Is there anyone that would like to speak in regards to ordinance 2025-09? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Reconvene the council meeting. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion?
Yes, I would like to bring up again the distance of the 25 foot in there, and I have some pictures. If you pass those down, let them look at the the easiest reference is the acres property used to be Greenhurst Country Club, and this picture shows me standing in the 25 foot line looking straight down the ditch. The ditch is a little hard to see in the picture, and then of course the road narrows down and widens out. So it was, the side measurements are probably a little hard to justify there, but the 25 foot is not at the bottom of the ditch, but just a couple feet up, coming back up the ditch. And they have mowed, Acres has mowed some of that property. And the first 25 foot is mowed, and you can't really tell it because of the way the ditch and stuff works. And the 50 foot is pretty much the tree line, maybe just a fuzz past the tree line. So it's hard to measure that with the vertical or the horizontal, whatever that's focal point, I guess is the proper term, because focal point narrows down and widens out there. But I think I'm kind of surprised that some of the people that live around Acres didn't come to the public hearing and express their concerns about mowing some of the area near their houses, that kind of thing. But I want to make a motion that we change that from 25 foot to 50 foot.
I'll second that.
And we have a motion and a second to change the 25 to 50 foot. So we'll begin with that one. Any discussion or questions?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a discussion on that. All properties are not the same dimensions. And if you start looking at some of the smaller properties and then put it to 50 feet, that could be the entire property if it's only 100 feet long. So I don't know. It's always hard trying to pick a value to one size fits all for a community when everything's so different. I don't know. I mean, I get it at acres, yeah. But on some other properties, maybe not. I don't know. I'm still up in the air.
Could it be
But
case by case, fenced by the,
But then how do you write that in there?
well, I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
I think
No,
25
not
feet
really.
seems like the right place to start. I mean, we have a code enforcement officer. I think we can obviously circle back to this. And I appreciate the picture for acres, but we can't just be pointed towards one property. And I don't know if there's any other issues across city limits with the same issue. I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. But 25 seems like a good place to start. We've had nothing.
I guess my thought was if people are so upset about acres not being 50 foot away, why aren't they here today?
I'm not hearing you, I'm sorry. You get a little closer to the mic. There
Well,
we
my
go.
question was, the people that live, like, let's say acres, and they have complaints about it, not being farther back, why aren't they here today at the public hearing?
That's a good question. I thought maybe they'd come today because I know they've been expressing even bigger than 25 foot. The mayor's probably talked to them more than I have, and they have expressed concern for more distance up to 100 feet or so, or was it
It's been.
all over the
it's
board?
Yeah,
We have not had any calls, probably since October, November.
Or as you say, at one point in time, the homeowners were gonna meet with acres about maybe letting them go in and mow it themselves. And I never knew what came out of that either.
I don't think it was satisfactory to the homeowners because they offered them the 25, 30 feet, offered them other options and they declined.
Okay. I guess that's my thinking is if people are upset about it, why have they not reached out to us besides just that small group behind acres?
Well, my thought on 50 foot is it's definitely not noticeable if it's undeveloped lot. You drive down the street or whatever and you don't realize that there's an area there that's got tall weeds or whatever, tall grass. And if only 50 foot, then you see all the tall stuff, especially this ditch area. And there's lots. I'm thinking there's probably like County Road 46, the water department has property down there that is not being mowed. Maybe they're only mowing 10 or 15 foot because there's a fence line along there. And if you live in the city and everybody mows their yard, it would be nice if you just don't notice the tall grass in the undeveloped lots. I think 50 foot is a good number.
As a reference, I went through the UDO and looked at setbacks to see what our setback requirements were. And none of our setback requirements, at least for front or side yards, is 25 feet or less. Typically, they're more. And I know we're talking about buildings and things like that, but as a matter of consistency, I'm kind of leaning towards a larger number than 25, just to be consistent with what our setbacks are.
My question is about what was already brought up. The properties are varied, and what's good for, in one property is 25 feet, another might be 50, might be better. So I just don't know how you write an ordinance that take care of everybody. Because 50 feet might be excessive in some cases and not in others. I guess if we had the public here expressing that big concern, I think that would probably weigh my decision.
Just to, I guess, throw my 2 cents in, I do think we've got to, currently we have a picture of acres. Acres has been the conversation. We have to be, I guess, careful as we're doing this, that the point of this and the focus of this is the city as a whole, and that we are not singling out entities or individuals, because that can create problems. And I don't I don't know how it works with every property. It would be nice if we could say there's metrics or things, there's a moving scale depending on the size of the property. I don't know how we would write that in. But I guess I would see potentially, and we don't have code enforcement here, but if it does impact the entire property because it's 50 feet, are we going to enforce that? And if we're not enforcing that because it's more of a burden than what this change is actually intended, then that gets into selective enforcement and all of those potential issues. So I think we have to be very careful that we are focusing on the city as a whole and what is the best way forward that is not singling out one property.
Zach, I think Natalie brought this up, 25 feet could be a starting point, and then could we revisit this in a year?
Absolutely.
And then say, hey, you know what, Kevin was right, we need to be 50 feet.
Absolutely.
It's one other, discussion. You're going to mow 25 foot. You're going to mow. The people are going to mow. So what's the difference if they're mowing 25 foot or 50 foot? They're going to, they got to mow. So that's not that much more. Now, Acres has a bigger property, but a smaller property, I don't think it's that big a deal, if it's 25 foot or 50 foot. I think looking at the perspective of looking at the property as you're driving by and the overall look for the city is we have mowed yards and mowed areas, so we at least have a 50-foot buffer there that's mowed on undeveloped properties. So that's all. I'm done saying. I'll quit talking.
In terms of the difference, it depends on the size of property again. I mean, you're doubling the amount of work that you have to do. So if you have a larger property, it's twice the amount of a larger time. So, I mean, that's what changes things.
Well, if you're pushing
and cost.
Any other discussion on the second motion? Hearing none, we'll have a motion and a second to change it from 25 feet required to 50. We'll vote on that first. I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
4-3.
Maybe you ought to do a roll call. Roll call vote.
Do that. Okay. For the clerk, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start down here.
I vote for yes.
No.
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 Yes.
Yes.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the first motion and second. Approve on second reading ordinance 2025-09. Is there any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a question. Roll call on this one too.
No, I think you'll be okay.
Hearing none, I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Ordinance number 2025-10, an ordinance to amend Chapter 150 of the Unified Development Ordinance of the City of Auburn. Summary. This ordinance amends Chapter 150, the Unified Development Ordinance of the City of Auburn, Indiana. The Unified Development Ordinance and this amendment applies to all properties within the City of Auburn's corporate boundaries, as well as the city's established extraterritorial jurisdiction. This amendment includes modifications to Article 2 zoning districts, Article 5 development standards, Article 9 processes, Article 10 enforcement and penalties, Article 11 definitions, and the Appendix A land use matrix. I move that we pass ordinance number 2025-10 on first reading.
Second.
Here we have a motion and a second. Pass ordinance 2025-10 on first reading. Any questions or discussion?
I have several items. I'm a no on this, just because I think there's too much going on here. There's too many changes. Some things that just don't make sense to me. The AG, ER districts that are primarily outside the city, but in the ETJ. I feel like some of these things, we're making exceptions for those that are going to create problems if those lands ever come inside the city, which I feel like is the purpose of the ETJ. So that was one issue. Just kind of scrolling down some things here quickly. The signs on the parapet walls, do we have enough regulation in a parapet wall that will support the extra weight of that sign versus the main wall of the building? I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but there was one where it talks about grass and new structures. The way I read that, if I build a new home, I can't occupy it until the grass is growing. The grass is established. I feel like some of the restrictions for size of trees planted in landscaping may be a little overreaching. There's just a list of things that I think need some cleaning up or maybe some readdressing. So I'm a no on this issue.
I just want to comment. I agree this is really big. I went to the Plan Commission meeting just so I could learn more about it, and let alone read it and stuff. So you get into this many amendments, somewhere down the line, we're going to be amending the amendments back to because they're not working or whatever. So this, I would prefer the amendment package be smaller.
Any other discussion?
I mean, we had subcommittee meetings. We had plan commission meetings. I don't know if Jen wants to comment on anything that was said, or I mean, a lot of this has been discussed, and so I don't know if you want to add anything to it. If that would be appropriate, which I think it would. Sorry, didn't have my mic on. Hopefully,
just one comment to go after, what Councilmember Fitchum just said. We have a UDO committee made up of members of the Planning Commission plus outside citizen members that are involved in development in the city. And they went through all the changes, unanimously recommended those changes to move forward to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission considered there was one additional change that they pulled out as a group that was proposed. So, but the Planning Commission in their consideration at the public hearing unanimously supported and recommended these changes. I realize the number, there's a lot of changes. There's no question about the number, but when you look at them, most of them are just cleaning up something that may have been omitted from another change. And a good example is when we created the MX district along 7th Street, the mixed use district, that was a new zoning district. Sometimes there's a lot of sections of code. You have to be sure that every other section of code that's related to what you just created is also changed. So a lot of these are just cleaning up, adding. We created our apartment district. We created the new 2-family district, the duplex district. So when we made all those districts through other changes, it doesn't get picked up immediately that, we should have changed this. We should have added, for example, parking. If you don't include, when you have parking standards for all the districts, you have to make sure when you create a new district that you put that symbol with that district. So parking applies to that new district. That got overlooked in a couple of instances. Those are the changes we're making. To me, the only significant change that I call significant is the landscaping. And you touched on that, Councilmember Braun. It's more about screening, buffering between new commercial and residential areas. There's not a requirement now. So a new business can come in next to a single family home or subdivision, and there's no requirement for any screening or buffering in our code. Zero. Dollar General that built out at Hunter's Glen, they volunteered a screening. Now it's just a privacy fence, but it's something. They didn't have to do that. Our code changed, and that's why I say significant. That code change would trigger a requirement. of some type of screening. Aside from that, these are all very minor adjustments to our code. I feel they are, and I think that's what the planning commission agreed to. But I just wanted to reiterate that it's coming to you without objection.
Can I ask one pointed specific question? Definitions.
Yeah.
Mobile home, manufactured home,
Yes.
modular home.
Yes.
When I read as they currently exist, they are somewhat different. Mobile homes, manufactured homes meet a federal standard. Modular homes are built to meet local building standards. But later in the document, there's one specific spot where you're basically changing the definition, eliminating the modular home definition and lumping it into manufactured homes. Is that not the building codes different enough? Does that change building codes at all towards those structures?
The building code still trumps. So you are correct. Modular homes have to be built to the Indiana Residential Code standards. The only reason that I propose to take modular home definition out is because that's the only time it's mentioned in the code. Nowhere else in our UDO is the term modular home listed. It's not listed in our appendix, which lists all the different uses. It's not there. It's nowhere else in the code. So we have a definition for what reason. And it's not listed as as a permitted use in one of our districts because it's treated the same as a site-built home, as a 1 or 2 family home. That's why the definition didn't make sense to me to have in there, because it doesn't serve a purpose. There's no reference, no reason for me to look that term up if I'm reading through the code. Manufactured home, as I go through the code, is absolutely a term that's in multiple places. I simply added it, or recommended we added it to the definition, just so people intermix those terms: manufactured, modular, mobile home. I just wanted a little clarification. I wanted the term at least to be there, with manufactured home, because the same standards have to be met as far as the basic standards, width of the building and all of that. But the modular home still has to be built to a higher code.
I guess my thinking would be, we have this committee that's going through it, that does this stuff every day. We could beat this ordinance to death. And like Councilman or Councilwoman DeWitt has said before, we got to start someplace. So we've cleaned it up. They're happy with the cleanup. And it doesn't mean that 2 months from now they find something wrong that we can't go back in and change it. So I guess, how long do you let it hang out there and not do anything with it? That's my opinion anyways.
Any other discussion?
I guess to one of your comments on grass has to be growing before, it just has to be seeded. So it says grass established, but it says sod, hydro seeding, or seeded. So as long as there's seed in the ground, it is satisfying the requirement.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. If there are any questions, I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Jim, thank you for coming forward and responding. Appreciate it. Ordinance number 2025-11, ordinance amending Chapter 90 of the City of Auburn Code of Ordinances. Summary. This ordinance amends and restates Chapter 90 entitled Animals of the City of Auburn Code of Ordinances. I move that we pass ordinance number 2025-11 on first reading.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to pass ordinance 2025-11 on first reading. Any questions or discussion? Excuse me. Hearing none, I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Ordinance number 2025-12, an ordinance amending Chapter 92 of the City of Auburn Code of Ordinances. Summary. This ordinance amends and restates Chapter 92 entitled Litter of the Auburn, City of Auburn Code of Ordinances. I move that we pass ordinance number 2025-12 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Pass ordinance 2025-12 on first reading. Any questions or discussion?
Is there a reason that we removed the police department from enforcement on this when we've left them in on everything else?
They're still included. They are just, it is adding that the administrator of the building and planning department, code enforcement officer, or any officer of the police department.
Got it. Okay. I got hung up on the crossed out. It's just worded or reordered. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We'll move on to reports. So under mayor, I'm going to address I guess you could say rumor that's been going around in regards to a property located at County Road 46A and Auburn Drive. There's been a rumor floating in social media. I've received many calls about a mobile home park going in that area. Due to the public hearing notice that there is a public hearing on Tuesday, July 8th at 6 o'clock here in the council chambers at Plan Commission. The preliminary site plan and the request for the rezoning is to rezone the property to R3, which is high density residential. What that means, typical subdivision is going to be R2, which requires a minimum lot square footage of 10,000 square feet. R3 allows for a minimum lot square footage of 7,200. That is something that has become more common due to the cost of construction. They do it in other communities as well because you can get that 2, 3, maybe 4 extra homes in that lot. So they are smaller lots. If it were to be some sort of mobile home park, they would be asking to rezone manufactured housing district. Is that correct, Ms. Councilman Mitchell? Okay. So just wanted to clear up a rumor that's been floating around. We do have a public hearing on Tuesday on this. And so I just wanted to share some information and educate on the scheduled public hearing on Tuesday, July 8th at the Plan Commission.
Can I add to that? Just so everyone's aware, that's currently zoned in 3 different sections. It's light industrial, commercial, and R2. So I know they're complaining and thinking it's a mobile home park, but would you rather have that or an industry move in? So it's all about the zoning right now. It's not about what's going in there yet. That'll come later.
The other steps in that process.
Correct.
So that's all I have for the mayor, council president,
No report.
Plan Commission.
You stole most of my thunder, but that is one item on the agenda. There is another item. The water department has a development plan. They're going to be doing some work on the North Main Street location facility.
Thank you.
Yep.
Committees.
Nothing for tax phase in.
Finance Committee will meet on the 9th here in chambers at 9 a.m.
Nothing pending for ordinance and resolution committee either.
Is there any other unfinished business to come before the council? Any new business? General good and welfare of the community? Next regular council meeting is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025 at 6 p.m.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
And a motion to second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?